Kusoo dhowow Baghdad Online Academy.
Hi, I'm Thomas. Welcome back to the course Project Management Fundamentals. Today's lecture is Project Implementation. Today we'll cover 4 topics: managing issues, managing people, managing the supply chain, and finally managing internal controls. Let's start by looking at the concept of collaborative issue management. The idea here is that issue management is something everybody on the project management team is involved in. Everybody's involved in identifying issues, and everybody's involved in addressing issues. Ideally, that's resolving issues on site, where someone who's directly involved in the situation can resolve an issue. That isn't always possible, and when it isn't, then the issue should be escalated up to the project manager, and the project manager can begin the issue management process from there. And the 4 steps in managing issues include issue identification and tracking. So in the case of an issue being brought to the attention of a project manager, that's the first step in the process, or the project manager himself or herself identifies an issue. That's where we begin. Next is issue analysis, deciding what do we need to do about this issue, how serious is this issue, how can we resolve this issue. Issue communication is the idea of making sure everyone who is affected by the issue is informed, and anyone who might be able to resolve the issue is informed. And then finally, issue control. This isn't the idea that you don't have issues because everything is in control. Rather, this means that you have a system so that issues can be addressed and resolved in an effective way. And one good issue management tool to use is an issue log. This will help with effective issue control. Here we have an example of the issue log, and in the issue log we're recording information about the issue, about timing, about who is responsible for managing the issue, and finally, when is the issue resolved. Having an issue log makes sure that issues are recorded and they're being managed. They're not overlooked or forgotten about. Next, let's look at the concept of managing people. The project manager has several responsibilities relating to managing people for the project. Acquiring project staff, finding the right people to work with the manager on the project, creating job descriptions so that it's clear what the responsibilities are of the staff members, creating organization charts. This provides a visual tool that's a summary and helps people understand relationships within the project. Project staff development is also important. It's important to have qualified people joining the project, but that doesn't mean that they have all of the skills they will need to effectively work on the project team. It might be that there are some particular components of the project that require specialized training. It also might be simply as a part of a project. Some projects go on for a long period of time. As a part of the project, there's a component of training to make sure that the project team's skills are continually developed and match the needs of the project. Performance assessments are also important so that the project manager is actively thinking about the performance of the team members. Are they performing as they were expected to perform? Is their performance meeting the needs of the project? And are there any changes that need to be made? If so, the project manager needs to address those situations directly with the individual team members of the project management team. And finally, establishing communication norms. What is the communication process among the team members of the project and within the larger stakeholder community? And various tools are available for stakeholder communications, not only communicating with the project management team, but communicating with all interested parties in the project. Status reports and meetings are typical ongoing kinds of communications tools for unusual or unexpected events, an event-driven communication, such as a report explaining something that has happened or a significant change in the project. Critical issues sessions also relate to perhaps an unexpected event that requires a meeting of the team and maybe other stakeholders. And training schedules during the project, opportunities for training for project team staff, as well as for other stakeholders, perhaps members of the community. And rollout schedules. Rollout schedules describe the timing and processes involved in particular components of the project. A helpful tool for stakeholder management, not only for members of the project management team, but for the larger stakeholder community, is a RACI matrix. A RACI matrix has 4 columns that answer 4 questions for each of the important activities of the project. Who is responsible? This addresses task performance, who's doing the particular task. Who is accountable? Answering the question, where does the approval come from for this particular task? Who is consulted? Who should be involved in input regarding the task, the timing, the details? And finally, who is informed? Who needs to know about the information relating to the task? They're not necessarily performing the task or giving input to the task, but the task affects them and they should be informed of that activity. Now we're looking at the supply chain. One component of managing the supply chain is procurement. Procurement planning, determining what the project is going to need as far as purchased resources is concerned. Who will provide those resources is identification of providers. Some simple procurement processes require estimates which are focused on price in order to determine who the best supplier is for the particular need for the project. And in more complex situations where other terms beyond price are important, proposals will be requested from providers. And estimates and proposals can then be evaluated for selection of one provider. The team can negotiate with that provider, and then an agreed term sheet can be created and the procurement contract can be awarded to one particular party. Another component of supply chain is logistics. Logistics includes inventory management. Inventory levels need to be connected to project needs. Not too much inventory, because that's an inefficient use of resources. Not too little inventory, that would be ineffective project management. And a component of knowing the right level of inventory is having a minimum stock on hand. It takes time to order inventory, to transport inventory, and so it's important to have a minimum level of inventory on hand. You know your reorder point so that between the time you place an order and the time you receive new inventory, you don't run out of inventory on site. And warehousing is another consideration of inventory management. Knowing where you're going to keep your inventory, knowing that you can access your inventory when you need it, and knowing that the inventory is warehoused in a secure location. Another component of logistics is materials transport, ensuring that you receive materials on a timely basis, and also ensuring that the transport used is cost effective. Development projects often occur in areas that aren't easy to get to, and transport can be a significant cost of purchased materials. So ensuring that cost of transport is effective is an important component of logistics. And the final component of supply chain management is assets. When we use the term assets, we're referring to purchases by the project that have a particular dollar value floor and have a particular minimum life. These concepts relate to accounting, and this isn't an accounting focused topic right now, but as a simple comparison, a pen is a low-cost item that doesn't last for a very long time. But a vehicle is a high-cost item that should have a long-term life. And the definitions that we can start with as a base are a cost of $1,000 or more and a life of 3 years or more. We'll use these qualifications to define an item as an asset. That will vary from one organization to another. These terms are based on the United Nations Development Program's definition of assets for reporting purposes. So items that fall into this category that meet these two requirements, we're going to consider these assets. And the process of asset administration includes recording assets, whether purchased or donated. They should be recorded into the accounting records of the project. Asset labeling ensures that it's clear that an asset is property of the project and this facilitates tracking assets. Asset monitoring is an occasional process to ensure that the project records match the physical assets that are on hand, and that if there are any differences, those can be investigated. Safeguarding assets is the process of ensuring that assets aren't damaged or destroyed, misplaced, or stolen. And finally, asset disposal relates to managing the process of selling off assets, ensuring that a fair price is received for any assets that are sold, or if assets are going to be donated, that there's been a process to approve that decision. And finally, we'll take a look at managing internal controls. Internal controls are procedures in place for the project to ensure that operations are effective, that they achieve the desired result, as well as efficient, that they're done with a reasonable use of resources, particularly manpower and money. Secondly, internal controls ensure reliability of project outcomes. If there isn't a control system in place to make sure that processes are consistent and are monitored and have a basis for performance, then the project outcome isn't going to be assured. Third, compliance with laws and regulations. Internal controls ensure that any compliance relating to the activities of the project as it relates to regulation of the country where the project is taking place, or international regulation in some cases, that compliance is in place. Another need for internal controls is the protection of assets, both physical assets, such as vehicles and computers, as well as intangible assets, which are intellectual property. And finally, effective internal controls help to reduce the risk of fraud and corruption in a project.